Welcome back to New York. I'm Brent Musburger with Jane and Irv. New Orleans has just gone ahead of Atlanta 7-0. Let's get you up to date now on all the scores around the league. And of course, last night, Jane, Tampa Bay shocked Detroit 31-16.
Rookie running back Jerry Eckwood from Arkansas became the NFL's first 100-yard gainer, rushing 20 times for 121 yards.
Philadelphia at the half. Many of you watching this game, they are dominating the New York Giants 23-3.
Jaworski with 2 touchdown passes to Harold Carmichael, who's caught a pass in his 97th consecutive game.
And the other game, the rest of the audience watching along the Pacific, San Francisco leading Minnesota by 6.
And that's 2 field goals by Ray Wersching.
And in a game beset with television problems, Washington leading Houston 17-6 at the half. We understand that in that game, the truck has lost power. Fans in Washington and Houston unable to see it. Those in Houston perhaps glad they are not watching it. Buffalo, meanwhile, is ahead of Miami by a score of 7-0.
Charles Rome's 76-yard run was on a recovery of a blocked field goal.
And the score I just gave you, New Orleans 7, Atlanta nothing, as Erxleben, the rookie, adds the extra point. Meanwhile, Dallas and St. Louis, the Cowboys, up by 3.
38-yard field goal, Rafael Septien.
Green Bay and Chicago in Soldier Field, they are scoreless in the first period. And another game just underway, also scoreless, Baltimore and Kansas City, first period action.
There's been a lot of talk during the offseason about the controversy concerning the Los Angeles Rams front office since the death of Carroll Rosenbloom. Brent has been watching that situation very closely out on the West Coast, and here's his report.
Carroll Rosenbloom's will stipulated that his wife, Georgia, would receive 70% of the football team, while Carroll's son, by an earlier marriage, Steve, would receive only 6%. That surprised many because Steve had been operating the Rams.
It wasn't necessarily a surprise because I had discussed it a little bit with my father. He had with me. The reasons are, they're varied. I mean, some of it had to do with some tax implications. He wanted Georgia certainly to have the prestige of owning the franchise, and he knew that I didn't care whether I owned any of it or all of it or whatever.
Georgia and her advisors quickly soured on Steve's management, though, and she turned toward a longtime Ram executive, Don Klosterman. He'd recently been forced into the background by Steve. Los Angeles newspapers said that the final straw came when Steve left a note in a mailbox demoting Klosterman. Steve Rosenbloom says that's not true.
I was fired on a Thursday. They had been meeting almost a week to determine my fate. I knew that when I went to New England. They were all aware of it before Don even got that note. That note, despite what people say, did not fire him. I like Don too. Our problem has been communication, which is a key. There's no secrets to success in this business. It's hard work and it's communication.
It's a very difficult thing to define philosophy. There's certain ways of doing things, and we didn't agree on the way things should be done.
What I tried to do was to do my job. What I had talked to Georgia about a number of times, since this is brand new to her, was for her to come along, as my father always used to say, make hay slowly, for her to come in, go through and begin the learning process. But she felt the urgency to come right in and start from the top, and I was fired because we have a difference in philosophy.
Yeah, I guess it's probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. The hardest, because I love him, you know.
Steve, what would Carroll Rosenbloom think of what's gone on?
Well, it's easy to say because I know, for instance, that she says, well, Carroll would have done this or Carroll would have done that. And it makes me think of an analogy. If your wife was a devout Catholic and she died, now you're left to raise the children. Now you start to raise them in the Jewish religion. And somebody asks you why, and you say, well, my wife would have wanted it this way.
The Ram players are a veteran bunch, and they may ignore this family feud, but front office turmoil generally influences how a team performs on the field. And the final chapter in this controversy has not yet been written. Now, Steve also told me he would not, as a minority stockholder, quit the Rams board of directors even though he was being pressured. And I want to clarify those two interviews so that no one thinks there was any distortion at all. I interviewed Steve last week and also was set to interview Georgia, but an attorney and a personal public relations man informed us there would be restrictions, such as no questions at all about Steve. We could not agree to those restrictions, therefore we declined the interview. Georgia was interviewed earlier by Jim Hill of KNXT at a session she called to clarify her position. And the NFL Today will continue on CBS after these messages from your local station. Archie Manning has just struck again, hitting West Chandler, and now the Saints are ahead of Atlanta by 13-0. Fans in Washington and Houston again watching that game. Let's turn our attention now to highlights of the Giants and the Eagles and how that game turned in the first half. The Giants scored first, field goal by Dinella. They had a chance for a touchdown, but then Berge snared this interception, and it turned the game completely around. Watch Jaworski go to Harold Carmichael. 97 straight games for Carmichael. The record, Danny Abramovich, 105. Now, Billy Campfield up over the middle. Montgomery out. He has the flu today, and Campfield got their touchdown. Here it is again, Carmichael, little alley-oop, tough to stop the big fella. And then it was Jaworski once again, looking for Carmichael, 41-yard touchdown pass, 23-3, that game at the half. Irv, do we have anything out of the Kingdome yet on that game?
The score is 13-0 right now in the second quarter. I haven't seen an extra point being kicked yet, but Atlanta, of course, New Orleans always go head-to-head when they meet, and sparks really fly. Archie Manning's had a pretty good day. He hit West Chandler early in the first quarter for a touchdown, to set up the first touchdown, and we'll see that play right here. Archie Manning, most valuable player in the National Football Conference last year, hits number 89, West Chandler, the speedy wide receiver. He takes the ball down to the 31-yard pass play down to the 16-yard line. And after that, they cashed it with Ike Harris catching a touchdown pass, 7-0. They came back later, Archie Manning to West Chandler, and they now lead 14-0 in the second quarter.
All right, let's send you back now to the stadiums and the games you're watching. We'll see you later.